you. So I decided to bring a little spring in with me this morning. I was not going to wear anything of doom and gloom. I decided to wear spring if I could. And I did it. We had a Mardi Gras parade last night in Long Beach. And this morning, the weather was crummy, but I put on my big thermal jacket and hood up, and I went out and walked anyway, just so I could see all the debris that had been spread around everywhere. And I don't need any more beads for sure. Do not need any more beads, but there certainly were a lot of them. We'll keep all these things in mind. This come in March, we're going to keep the time change in mind. I'm trying to decide if we're going to have the 9:15 group meeting in March. We won't the first Sunday, that's next Sunday. And then still trying to decide if we will the third Sunday. And the reason is that's when the night before is when we spring forward, I believe. And some people are having a hard enough time being in at 9:15 anyway. So I don't want to put any undue pressure on anybody, okay? I'm a morning person, but that doesn't mean everyone is. So as I was sitting in my office this morning, sitting there in prayer, and I was holding in my consciousness just what I explained a moment ago with the prayer, and sent a text to Christy, not knowing she was on her way, said, I hope that your mom slept last night. So here she is. I guess she slept enough. Answered to my question and my prayer, sent a text to Tammy, not knowing she was coming with her broken elbow and all, and asked her how she's feeling. She's more comfortable all the time, and she assured me of that, and the next thing I knew, she stepped in the front door. So thank you, ladies, for being here anyway. Christy and Micah, and I hope that, or I know that what I'm talking about this morning, there's a divine reason for it, and we'll get to that as I go along with the different stories I'm going to tell. But the music was perfect and goes right along with the theme, and thank you. We don't coordinate the music. You'd think we do, but we do on another level, I think we do. So I'm talking today about flexibility and the grace of flowing through life. And obviously, there are some times of such deep grief, it's hard to flow through life. And a loss of a loved one is definitely one of those times you're meant to take all the time that healing takes. I grew up in a large family, as I've shared with you many times, and one of the good things you find out when you grow up in a larger family is that you must be flexible. The more rigid you are, the more difficult it is. And so if I ever know of people that grew up as a one child family, I encourage them to go out of their way to find ways of being with other people. And of course, when you're in a large family, you're going out of your way to find a little peace and quiet. And it could be the reason, too. It could equally be the reason that some people turn out to be rigid and stubborn in their thoughts and actions. We live in a dynamic universe, and the more we can be in tune with that, the more life will cooperate with us. I read a story of a little village that had not had rain for 5 years. There was a drought. Everything was so dry they couldn't grow anything. They'd been praying for rain. They had a few other rainmakers come in, but to no avail. Nothing happened. So they had a rainmaker come in from a far-off land, and he arrived, and he pitched his tent. He went within the tent for 4 days, not saying a word to anyone. And on the 5th day, the rains came. So when he came out and was talking with the villagers, they said, "What in the world did you do? You just went in there and hid." He said, "Well, I went inside and I communed with the divine. And what I did was to remove everything from my consciousness that kept me from connecting with God." And that's what had happened here in this land. They were turbulent, and they had not connected with the divine. And there was so much chaos and drama going on, they had separated themselves from God. And you might call it, it is a dynamic universe, and the divine flow is always there. But unless we are aware of it and working with it, then it's doing us no good. You can say, or you could look at it being a time when you're standing on the hose. Can you think of that? You have a water hose. It's flowing. The water's turned on. The water's flowing. But what you're doing, you're stopping it by standing on the hose. Anybody ever had a time like that? Stopping your own good flow? Yeah? Okay. I thought so. We all have. Yeah. So there's a story even from Unity minister, maybe one of the best known Unity ministers, Eric Butterworth, that taught all over, but especially in New York for several years, and so many people got to know him then. He had one of the biggest cathedrals there in the city, and it was usually standing room only. Wonderful, wonderful man. But his wife told on him, told of a time when even he was standing on the hose of his good. He usually didn't see people after church on Sundays, but what he would do, he would save a week in the summer for a retreat. And for a full week, he would make himself available at this retreat center to be with the congregants and whoever else wanted to come to this retreat. And so this particular time, they were getting ready to go. He had a new car. It was a German car. Supposedly you couldn't break into it. So he was putting all the materials for the retreat in the car, and he closed the lid, and then he remembered that his keys were in the trunk with all the materials. So he did what most of the rest of us do. He panicked. He forgot who he was. And so for a while, he's phoning everybody he can think of, the dealer, even the manufacturer, and everything he could think of. His wife, Olga, finally stopped him, and she said, "Eric, would you stop? Would you stop? Now's the time to practice what you preach. Are you willing to even try? Maybe that gardener over there could open it with a coat hanger." He said, "Oh no, they guaranteed me that nobody could break into this car. Nobody could do that." She said, "Okay, are you willing just to let me ask him?" And so she did, had the gardener come over, and within minutes, he had the car open. And Eric says, "Oh yeah, I forgot who I was, didn't I? I forgot." We all do that momentarily. It depends on what it is and how important it is to us. We all sort of, we get off balance, and then we remember, oh yeah, the sooner I settle down and stop this nonsense. There was another time he was in an airport in the Southwest, and they were hoping to board any moment, but the flight attendant at the desk told them that they didn't know when they were going to fly. There was a problem with the airplane, and so the chaos that happens then. Everybody's walking around yelling and screaming, and by the way, my granddaughter gets her share of that. She works at the front desk at one of the casinos, the bigger ones. I'm not going to mention it by name, but you can guess, in Biloxi, and she gets a lot of complaining coming her way. I mean, it's just amazing sometimes. She'll tell me, I'll ask her how her night was. If she rolls her eyes and doesn't say anything, I know it was pretty bad. But anyway, back to the flight out in the Southwest. And so everybody's going up to the desk, stomping and yelling and carrying on, and Eric noticed another gentleman close by that wasn't saying a word. He was just sitting there quietly. So they struck up a conversation, and Eric asked him what his story was. He said, "Oh, if you had known me years ago, I would have been right up there with them. I would have been yelling the loudest." He said, "Life has taught me a lot of lessons, and a lot of them haven't been very pleasant. And I've learned there's some things I can't control. And the sooner I sit back and relax and allow the flow to come through me and around me, the better it's going to be." So it wasn't long before they came back on at the desk and said that they were ready to board, and guess who they called up first? Eric Butterworth and the man that was sitting so quietly to board the plane. And I've told you too about the trip I was taking in 2021. We'd had a lot of responsibility. We'd been flexible. We kept the church open. We did everything we could to go online and just live streaming. And I thank my husband for getting that started. And we did it quickly, and we stuck with it. And sometime around the fall of that year, 2021, I was pretty much exhausted, and I said, I need to take a few weeks. We've held this together, and it's been pretty heavy, and I need just to take a little time. And we'd also had a couple of deaths in our spiritual community that were pretty hard to, unexpected, and some younger people you just would never have guessed, you would never have imagined. So I decided to take myself to Portugal. Don't ask me why, but it was just something that came up. So about the third week in September of 2021, I decided to take myself to Portugal. And so, of course, at that time, I learned a lot what to do and what not to do. You needed a COVID test, and it had to be current within the past 2 days. And that had to be current by the time you were boarding the international flight in Atlanta. Had to be current. I did not recognize how critical it was. Went ahead and got the test through one of the drugstores. Promised me I'd have the results. I'm sitting in the airport that afternoon, no results. Checking my phone every few minutes, but they promised me I'd have them in time to go on that flight. It was a timing thing. You couldn't do it too soon, you couldn't do it too late. Had to be just right. And so I went to the help desk down at that terminal, the international terminal, I got all kinds of advice. Why they didn't know more, I don't know, but they didn't. And they told me somebody in a hotel a few miles away was doing COVID tests. He could give me one. It would take me, I'd have to go get a taxi, though, and leave the airport. And then it was just, I got all sorts of crazy advice until I did what Eric Butterworth did. I said, okay, wait a minute. I'm not leaving this hotel to go to somebody's hotel room. This airport to go to somebody's hotel room? Are you kidding me? Somebody I don't know? If Spirit wants me to go on this trip, I'll go. If not, I won't. So I went and sat down and prayed for a bit. Still no text from the test. And so it was time to board. And I went over and spoke to the man at the front desk. He was the one that was collecting the certificates of results. I said, I am waiting patiently to get the results of this test. It's not coming. I don't know what to do. He said, well, ma'am, we have a lab set up just around the corner just for that very thing. Walk down to the corner and get your test and come back. I'm thinking, could it be that simple? What a miracle. They weren't advertising it, you see, because if they had, nobody would have gone to get their COVID test. You understand that in human nature, right? We all understand how human nature is. We won't get it if we think we can get it at the airport. So I went down, got the test, got my certificate that I was COVID-free, went back up, checked in for my flight. A little bit later, I'm checking my phone, and sure enough, there comes the text or the email with the results. And don't you know, they had the wrong date on when the test was taken. It wouldn't have worked anyway. It was already a day out of being current. I couldn't believe it. I never did complain to them, though. Why should I? They were working so hard at these labs to try to get all these tests done. And why would I complain? I got what I wanted. And it just was further proof to me. I sat there and I thought, well, isn't that amazing? I sat and I prayed. I was calm. And I said, okay, if Spirit wants me to go on this trip, I will. And if not, I won't. I was totally okay with it. Totally okay. So those are the times when we need to listen to our inner guidance. I met a man who's been in Unity many, many years. He wasn't a Unity minister, but he's a licensed Unity teacher, Stephen Lane Taylor. He was from Texas. And I met him at a conference many, many years ago. He had just written this book, Row, Row, Row Your Boat. And it's a wonderful book. It's still out there and available. It's just a wonderful book about how to make it through the challenges of life. And he said, whether you're aware of it or not, there's an underlying current in your life, a divine flow that is continuously guiding you toward the effortless fulfillment of your heart's desires. Isn't that wonderful? Don't you love that? Don't you love that? The challenge is learning how to recognize and cooperate. He tells of a story when he was still living in the Dallas area, and he worked with promotions. And he had been given a task to come up with a couple of promotions where American Airlines and American Express were doing a promotion together. And he came up with two that he thought were really great. And he had one, though, that was a preference. So he submitted them to his boss, and turns out Stephen wasn't going to be able to be in the meeting where he was going to present it to the people that would say yes or no. But his boss was. So his boss told him which of the two he preferred. And Stephen says, "Oh, no, I don't like that one as much. I think that they're going to like the one of the couple in San Francisco, and they're going to see this as the one that's really going to be perfect for this right slogan, just perfect for this promotion." And the boss says, "Well, Stephen, I'll let you decide in the end, but I think you're making a mistake. I think this other promotion is the one that is right for what they're doing here." So the boss finally said, "Well, you know what? It is yours, though. I'll let you make the choice, but I'm just telling you what I think." So at first, Stephen thought, "Oh, well, this is my opportunity. I'm just going to go ahead and push this one that I think is best." But all of a sudden, he stopped, took a moment, and took a deep breath, and said in his mind he saw a caution sign. And that caution sign said, "You better stop and think about this." And so he did. And then he came back. He said, "Well, you know, Dave, I trust you. And if your guidance tells you, your guidance and wisdom tells you this is what the client is going to want and approve of, then we're going to go with that, because I've let my ego get in the way, and I don't want it to." And see, it would have been a really big loss, too, to the firm, because they were going to lose that business with American Express and American Airlines. And they didn't want to, obviously, right? They wanted this account. And so then the client called back a few days later, and they decided to go with the ad that was presented to them and the promotion and everything that went with it. And then when they gave all the other details of how they were going to put it together, it was clearly obvious that the other preferred ad that Stephen wanted to go with would not have worked. That's one of the things, the proofs that he had of how the flow was always with him, but he had just disregarded it. Some of us may know the story of Netflix and Blockbuster. And you know the divine flow goes with us in business too, especially in business, not just in our personal lives. But Netflix saw early on that the CDs and DVDs and mailing them back and forth, or having someone come to their stores and checking them out, was not going to work forever. And so in 2007, they aligned themselves with online only. They're still around. Guess what happened to Blockbuster? They were stubborn. They decided they knew best. They decided that that was the way it should be, and things shouldn't change to that old online stuff. So they refused to change. They kept checking out the DVDs, and they kept a business of sending them back and forth in the mail to their customers. And guess what? They filed for bankruptcy. That's what stubbornness and inflexibility will do with you. And I know we've had those instances in our own lives. We all have. We all have. There's a story in the Little Buddha, and Siddhartha comes across a music teacher who's teaching a young student how to tune his musical instrument. He says, "You can't leave them too loose. You can't even get a tune out of it. And you can't tune them too tight either, or they'll break. And it's the same with us. If we are so loose that we don't even have a goal, don't even have an aspiration in our lives. Who was it that Rick had an aspiration for wisdom? Was that what you said? Yeah. Okay. See, he's got an aspiration for wisdom, so he's going to tighten his strings for that. But if they're so tight, if you're so stubborn and inflexible, you won't even hear the melody when it's sung to you. You truly won't. Now this morning, I know that I've had a whole lot of stories for you, and I hope one or the other has meant something. I had something I wanted to read that New Thought teacher Ernest Holmes said. Nature will not let us stay in any one place too long. She will let us stay just long enough to gather the experience necessary to the unfolding and advancement of the soul. Isn't that beautiful? This is a wise provision, for should we stay here too long, we would become too set, too rigid, too inflexible. Nature demands the change in order that we may advance. When the change comes, we should welcome it with a smile on the lips and a song in the heart. And I was thinking about that particularly when we'll see people argue with something that's happened, that's occurred. And the grieving process especially will go on and on and on. The more we argue, this shouldn't be, this shouldn't have happened. It was before his time. It was before her time. And the truth is that a soul cannot leave the body, or a spirit, without the soul's permission. Okay? The spirit cannot leave the body without the soul's permission. And I'm not talking about the personality here, but the soul. And as we go through the grieving process, the more we can remember this soul knew and was in agreement with this timing, this particular timing. That's hard. I know that's hard. But the more we argue and the longer we argue with, that shouldn't have happened. I don't want that to happen. And blaming and coming up with everything else we can, the longer it's going to take us to come to a sort of peace. And I know that's a hard subject right now, but that came to me this morning, is that we need to, when a death has occurred and a person has moved on to the next life, the sooner we could recognize the soul's agreement, the sooner we'll come to peace. But there is still a grieving process, and it's important too. Byron Katie said that the more we argue with reality and the longer, the more we'll be out of a alignment with God and the flow of life. And she said that's only 100% of the time. 100% of the time that we argue with reality and the things that have happened. I would just ask you this morning to look at your life and see where you've been rigid, not willing to go with the flow. And as someone else really important said, Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. Thank you for your time.